He stood in the doorway with his suitcase in one hand and his sunglasses already on, like he was posing for a travel ad instead of leaving his wife behind. "It's just a short trip," he said casually. "Mom hasn't been feeling well, and my sister needs a break. We'll rest for a week at the resort. You can stay at the Dacha and dig up the potatoes. Someone has to do it." Someone. That someone was me. I watched as he loaded the car, laughing with his mother and sister. They were dressed in bright summer clothes, their excitement impossible to hide. His mother barely glanced at me, only reminding me not to forget to sort the potatoes by size and to store them properly in the cellar. My sister-in-law smirked and said, "Fresh air will do you good." Fresh air. As the car drove away, the dust settled slowly over the quiet yard of the Dacha. The silence felt heavier than the heat. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty road, trying to understand how my life had become this, the unpaid laborer in my own marriage. The potato field stretched endlessly behind the house. Row after row of green plants ready to be dug up. It was hard work, especially alone. But I tied my hair back, picked up the shovel, and started digging. The first few hours were exhausting. The soil was dry and stubborn. My back began to ache, and sweat ran down my face. But as I worked, something inside me began to shift. With every shovel of earth I turned, I felt less like a victim and more like someone waking up. I remembered the early days of our marriage. Back then, he used to say I was his partner. We would plan things together. We dreamed of traveling the world. But slowly, his mother's voice became louder in our home. Decisions started being made without me. Vacations were family trips that somehow didn't include me. My role was always practical: cooking, cleaning, maintaining the house, taking care of the garden. And now digging potatoes. By the third day, my hands were blistered, but I had made real progress. Neighbors passed by occasionally. Some offered help, others offered sympathy. One elderly woman from the nearby house stopped and said quietly, "You deserve better, dear." Those words stayed with me. On the fourth evening, something unexpected happened. A black SUV pulled up near the gate. I thought maybe my husband had forgotten something and returned. But instead, a man in a suit stepped out, looking around as if searching for someone. He approached me politely and asked for my name. It turned out he was a lawyer. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake. But then he explained that my late aunt, a relative I hadn't seen in years, had passed away and left me something in her will. I was stunned. I barely remembered my aunt, except for her kind smile and her independence. She had never married and always traveled alone. The lawyer handed me documents. According to the will, I had inherited her apartment in the city and a significant amount of savings. I stood there in the middle of the potato field, covered in dirt, holding papers that changed everything. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the small kitchen table in the Dacha, reading and rereading the documents. The numbers seemed unreal. The apartment alone was worth more than the house my husband constantly reminded me was his. His. I realized something important. I had been living in a story where I thought I had no power. But the truth was, I had simply forgotten it. The next morning, instead of digging potatoes, I drove to the city with the lawyer. We visited the apartment. It was beautiful. Bright windows, a balcony overlooking a park, modern renovations. My aunt had good taste. It felt peaceful there, like a new beginning waiting for me. Over the next few days, I made decisions I had postponed for years. I opened a separate bank account. I consulted with another lawyer about my marriage. I checked property documents carefully. I discovered something else. The house we lived in wasn't entirely his. Part of it had been renovated using money I inherited years ago from my parents. Legally, I had a claim. Meanwhile, my husband posted photos from the resort. He and his family smiling by the pool, dining in fancy restaurants, enjoying spa treatments. Not once did he call to ask how I was managing alone. Only short messages. "Did you finish the potatoes? Don't forget to water the tomatoes." On the seventh day, he finally called. His voice was cheerful. "We're coming back tomorrow. Mom says you should prepare her favorite pie." I listened silently. Then I said calmly, "I won't be here." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "I mean I won't be at the house. I've moved to the city." He laughed, thinking I was joking. "Very funny. Stop being dramatic." "I'm not joking." His tone changed. "What are you talking about? I inherited an apartment, and I've been thinking a lot this week. When you chose to leave me here while you went on vacation, you made something very clear. I'm not your partner. I'm your convenience. He tried to interrupt, but I continued. I deserve respect, and I won't accept less anymore. The conversation ended badly. He accused me of overreacting. He blamed his mother's health. He said I was ungrateful. But for the first time, his words didn't shake me. When they returned from the resort, they found the house quiet. I had taken my personal belongings and left a folder on the table, copies of legal documents and a note saying I would be contacting him about division of property. A week later, he came to the city, demanding to see me. He expected tears, apologies, maybe even guilt. Instead, he found me calm, composed, sitting in my aunt's bright apartment with sunlight streaming through the windows. He looked different without the confidence of control. Smaller. We can fix this, he said. You're overthinking. Mom didn't mean anything by it. I looked at him and realized something surprising. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply done. Marriage isn't about fixing things after disrespect, I said quietly. It's about not allowing them in the first place. He tried to persuade me, to promise changes. But promises made after consequences rarely hold value. In the following months, the divorce process began. It wasn't easy. There were arguments, negotiations, attempts to intimidate me. But now I had legal support, financial independence, and most importantly, self-respect. The potatoes at the dacha were eventually harvested. Not by me. He had to hire workers because his mother refused to do it and his sister had other plans. Sometimes I think about that week alone in the field. It felt like punishment at first. But it became a gift. The physical labor cleared my mind. The silence forced me to listen to myself. The dirt under my nails reminded me that I was capable of hard things. People often ask when a marriage truly ends. It doesn't end with one argument or one trip to a resort. It ends the moment one partner stops seeing the other as equal. He thought he left me with potatoes. But he left me with clarity. Today, I live in the apartment my aunt gave me. I started a small online business. I travel, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. I choose where I go. I choose how I spend my time. And every autumn, when I see potatoes in the market, I smile. Because I remember the woman standing in the field, exhausted and overlooked. She didn't know it yet. But she was digging up far more than potatoes. She was digging up her freedom. The divorce papers did not arrive with drama. They came in a plain envelope, slipped under my apartment door by a courier who did not know he was delivering the final chapter of a life I had outgrown. I stared at my name printed neatly beside his and felt something unexpected, not sadness, not fear, but relief. Clean, steady relief. He did not make it easy. At first, he tried charm. Flowers arrived. Messages came late at night. We can still fix this. Mom regrets everything. You know I can't imagine life without you. The words might have worked a year ago. Maybe even a month ago. But something fundamental had shifted inside me during that week at the dacha. I had seen myself clearly for the first time, not as someone's wife, not as someone's daughter-in-law, but as a person with choices. When charm failed, anger followed. He accused me of betrayal. He said I had been waiting for an opportunity to leave. He told mutual friends that money had changed me, that I had become arrogant after inheriting the apartment. It was easier for him to believe that than to admit he had taken me for granted. The legal process revealed truths that had been buried under years of silence. The house we had lived in was indeed partly mine. The renovations paid with my parents' inheritance were documented. My lawyer was calm, precise, and firm. I learned to sit in meetings without shrinking, to speak clearly about what I deserved. His mother attended one of the hearings. She did not look at me directly. But when she finally spoke, her words were sharp. You're destroying the family over pride. I surprised myself by answering gently. No, I'm protecting myself because there was no family to protect me. That was the moment I realized I was no longer afraid of her. While the legal battles continued, I began building something new. The apartment felt less like an escape and more like a foundation. I repainted the walls in soft neutral tones. I filled the balcony with plants, not potatoes, but lavender, rosemary, small cherry tomatoes in bright pots. I chose every detail myself. No one criticized my taste. No one reminded me whose money had paid for it. With part of the inheritance, I invested in a small online home goods store. It started modestly, curated kitchen items, handmade textiles from local artisans, simple but elegant pieces that made everyday life feel special. I worked long hours learning marketing, logistics, customer service. It was exhausting, but it was mine. The first month brought only a handful of orders. The second month doubled that number. By the sixth month, I had repeat customers. Independence is not loud, it grows quietly, like roots spreading beneath the soil. One afternoon, I received a message from his sister. I hadn't heard from her since the day they left for the resort. Her message was short: "I didn't realize things were so bad. I'm sorry." I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't feel anger toward her anymore. Just distance. I replied politely, wishing her well. But I did not reopen the door. He, however, continued to resist the inevitable. When it became clear the court would recognize my financial contributions, his tone changed again. Now he wanted compromise. He proposed selling the house and splitting the proceeds fairly. He even suggested mediation to avoid further public disputes. I agreed, not because I trusted him, but because I was no longer fighting emotionally. I was negotiating logically. The mediation meeting lasted 4 hours. There were tense silences and careful calculations. In the end, we reached an agreement. The house would be sold, and I would receive a legally fair portion. Enough to secure my future completely. When I walked out of that building, I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt calm. Victories built on justice are quieter than victories built on revenge. The sale of the house took several months. During that time, he had to manage it alone. Repairs, showings, paperwork. His mother had moved in temporarily, complaining about everything. The irony did not escape me. One evening, out of curiosity rather than longing, I drove past the Dacha. The potato field was empty now, turned over and resting for the season. The air carried the smell of early autumn. I stood by the fence and remembered how small I had felt there. It amazed me how quickly perspective can change. The same field that once symbolized isolation now felt like a turning point. It had been the place where I realized silence is sometimes louder than arguments. Where absence reveals truth more clearly than confrontation. A year after he left for that resort, my life looked entirely different. The business had grown enough for me to hire a part-time assistant. I collaborated with designers, expanded the product line, and began shipping internationally. I attended networking events, something I would have avoided before, afraid of judgment or failure. Now, I introduced myself confidently, not as someone's wife, but as the founder of my own brand. Financial security gave me options, but emotional growth gave me strength. I started traveling again, this time on my own terms. My first trip was simple, a quiet coastal town. I walked along the shore at sunrise, breathing in salt air, feeling the vastness of the horizon. No schedules dictated by others. No family politics, just space. On that beach, I understood something profound. I had confused stability with safety. I thought enduring disrespect was the price of security. But real safety comes from knowing you can stand alone. The divorce was finalized without spectacle. We signed papers in a neutral office. He looked older, tired, not defeated, just different. Perhaps life had forced him to confront his own habits. Before leaving, he said quietly, "I never thought you would actually go." "I never thought I would either," I answered honestly. And that was the truth. Strength is often discovered accidentally. Months passed. The apartment became fully mine in every sense. I hosted small dinners with friends. Laughter-filled rooms that once echoed with uncertainty. I built routines that nourished me, morning coffee on the balcony, evening walks in the park below, quiet Sundays reading or planning new ideas. Occasionally, mutual acquaintances would update me about him. His mother had returned to her own apartment. His sister was planning to move abroad. He was dating someone new. I felt no jealousy, because my happiness was no longer dependent on comparison. The biggest transformation, however, was internal. I stopped apologizing for having needs. I stopped minimizing my work. I stopped asking for permission to dream bigger. There were still difficult days. Running a business is unpredictable. Loneliness sometimes crept in during quiet nights. But loneliness is different from feeling invisible beside someone who should see you. One late afternoon, as I packed orders for shipment, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an old photo memory, from years ago at the Dacha. I was standing beside him, holding a basket of freshly dug potatoes, smiling obediently at the camera. I looked at that woman carefully. She wasn't weak, she was simply waiting. Waiting for permission, waiting for appreciation, waiting for change to come from someone else. I whispered softly to her image, "You don't have to wait anymore." The most surprising outcome of everything was how it changed my view of relationships. I no longer sought someone to complete my life. I wanted someone to complement it. There is a powerful difference between the two. When I eventually began dating again, I did so slowly, carefully, not from fear, but from clarity. I asked questions I once avoided. I paid attention to small behaviors, respect in everyday conversations, willingness to listen, balance in shared responsibilities. Because love without respect is just dependency. 2 years after that resort trip, I received an invitation in the mail. His cousin was getting married. At first, I considered ignoring it. But then I realized something. I was not hiding anymore. I attended. The atmosphere was festive. Music, laughter, familiar faces. Some people looked at me with curiosity. Others with admiration. A few avoided eye contact entirely. He was there too. We greeted each other politely. Briefly. No tension, no bitterness. Just two people who once shared a life and then chose different paths. At one point during the evening, I stepped outside for fresh air. The sky was clear, stars scattered across the darkness. I thought about that night at the Dacha when I had sat alone at the kitchen table, reading my aunt's will. If that lawyer's car had never appeared, would I still be there? Digging, enduring, convincing myself it was normal. Perhaps, but life has a way of presenting opportunities disguised as disruptions. The potatoes were never the real issue. The real issue was value, how I allowed myself to be valued. Today, when I speak to women who feel trapped in similar situations, I don't tell them to leave immediately. I don't tell them inheritance or sudden change will rescue them. I tell them this: pay attention to how you feel when you are alone. Not distracted, not managing others' expectations, just alone with your thoughts. If the silence feels like freedom instead of fear, that is your answer. The field at the Dacha taught me endurance. The inheritance gave me leverage. But the decision to walk away, that was entirely mine. And that is why it mattered. He went to a resort with his mother and sister, believing I would stay exactly where he left me. He underestimated the power of a woman who finally understands her worth. And sometimes, all it takes to uncover that power, is a shovel, a quiet week, and the courage to imagine something more.